Whoever you are, wherever you are on life's journey, you're welcome here.
Thank you, Ismail. Good morning and welcome to worship at the Congregational Church of San Mateo, United Church of Christ. Whether you're joining us in San Mateo or somewhere else in the world, we're so glad to have you with us today. If you're new or visiting with us or worshiping here for the first time, we invite you to go on our website and give us some information about yourself. There's a form right on the main page, ccsm-ucc.org, where you can let us know who you are and let us be in touch with you so we can be church for you and with you. That same form can also be used for prayer requests, so we encourage anyone to just let us know anything big or small going on in your life so that we can pray for you and with you. On this Sunday, we give a special thank you to all of our church school teachers, volunteers, and kids. This has been an unprecedented year for our church school programs, and we're just so grateful for all of our teachers and all of our kids and families who have just gone with the flow and migrated online. It's been a really wonderful time to connect on Zoom, to do our church school programs and to have great conversations, particularly connecting this moment in time that we're living through with our faith. So thank you so much to our teachers. And at this end of the school year, also want to say a big congratulations to all those who are graduating, all those who have just completed this year. Thank you also to teachers and parents and everyone who has stepped up. Just so you know, this is not the end of our church, school, or youth group programming. We'll continue in the summer, but in a slightly different way. So watch for an email from me to learn more about that. And now let's join together and sing one of our congregation's favorite hymns, All Are Welcome, and the words will be on the screen.
That everyone felt welcomed from the beginning of the service until now, and I invite you to take a deep breath and find a moment of stillness. And as Melanie sings, I invite you to add your prayers to the comments or send us emails. Let us be in touch with you. Melanie will sing Come Healing and sink down as she sings, and then Jorge will lead us in prayer.
God, we ask that you hear our prayers. And God, we ask you that we may continue to show up for one another, as so much is happening out in the world, so much mourning, so much injustice, so much fear, that we may continue to be reminded of the importance to reach out to one another. So we ask you, God, to guide us, to continue to inspire us, to continue to spark creativity and imagination in our spirits to move forward during these times, God. To move forward in a way that truly brings justice to a world full of injustices, God. To move forward also, God, in a way where we still feel love while we still have to shelter in place because of COVID-19. And so we ask, God, that you continue to protect us as well, that we may continue to just do our part. And those who are sick, God, we ask that you comfort them. Those who feel alone in this world, we ask that your presence is felt much stronger. Continue to use us, oh God. Continue to use us. And so, God, we thank you also for the prayer that you taught your disciples that we still say today. So together we pray. Our God, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us of our sins as we forgive those who sin against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thy is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever. Amen.
Our reading today is a poem by David White called what to remember when waking. In that first hardly noticed moment in which you wake, coming back to this life from the other more secret, movable, and frighteningly honest world where everything began, there is a small opening into the new day, which closes the moment you begin your plans. What you can plan is too small for you to live. What you can live wholeheartedly will make plans enough for the vitality hidden in your sleep. To be human is to become visible while carrying what is hidden as a gift to others. To remember the other world in this world is to live in your true inheritance. You are not a troubled guest on this earth. You are not an accident amidst accidents. You were invited from another and greater night than the one from which you have just emerged. Now, looking through the slanting light of the morning window towards the mountain presence of everything that can be, what urgency calls you to your love? What shape waits in the seed of you to grow and spread its branches against a future sky? Is it waiting in the fertile sea? In the trees beyond the house? In the life you can imagine for yourself? In the open and lovely white page on the writing desk?
Scripture story, we have Jesus and his disciples. They're walking around, and Jesus has a bunch of interesting things that he's teaching people, and it starts to get beyond his disciples. And because in those days, you couldn't just follow him on Instagram, and you couldn't just catch him on YouTube, you had to actually go to where he was if you wanted to hear what he was saying and see what he was up to. So people started to come people started to gather, and Jesus was looking for big places where people could come and listen to what he had to say. And so at one point, he's teaching them. He's sharing his vision with them, and he's got all these people there with him. And his disciples start noticing, people are getting hungry. And they start saying to each other, people are getting hungry. They don't have anything to eat. There's nowhere around here to buy anything. And so, at some point, somebody gets a little bit brave and says to Jesus, people are getting hungry. And Jesus says, you're right. People are hungry. And there's nothing around here. There's nobody to buy any bread from. So we're going to have to feed them because I can't send them home like this. They're too hungry. They'll collapse on the way. So he says to the disciples, well, how much bread do you guys have? And they look at each other and they look at the crowd and they think, Jesus, come on. This is a lot of people, but they've been around Jesus long enough to know that you don't just tell Jesus that's not a good idea. So they say to him, well, okay, fine, we have 7 loaves of bread. And the understated part is that's clearly not enough for all these folks. And Jesus says, great. Have the people sit down and distribute that bread. And I'm sure the disciples looked at each other, and I'm sure they were a little exasperated, but they had the people sat down and they started sharing the bread around, and people started eating, and they ate and ate until they had plenty, and they were all full. And Jesus said to the disciples, now go and collect up the leftovers. And they did. They took around these baskets, big baskets, and they filled them up, 7 baskets of leftover pieces of bread. And all the people had plenty to eat so that when they walked home, they had plenty of energy to get where they were going. And Jesus and the disciples got into a boat to cross the sea to go on to another place. And the disciples realized that they only had 1 loaf of bread with them for that journey, which seemed like not even enough for that small group. And Jesus started to teach them in that boat. He started to tell them metaphors, which was kind of his style. He started to tell them, be careful what ideas, be careful the yeast that comes into your midst from the Pharisees or from Herod. Be careful about that stuff. And the disciples looked at each other and they said, he's mad at us because we didn't bring enough bread. He's hangry. He didn't get enough before. He's talking about yeast now. And I have to imagine that Jesus is a little bit annoyed at this point. And he says to them, were you not right there 5 minutes ago when we took 7 loaves of bread and fed 4,000 people with it? Did you not see that? Did you not have that bread and then those baskets in your actual hands? And you think I'm talking about a loaf of bread. You think I'm saying that 1 loaf of bread is not enough, and that's what I'm trying to tell you. Have you not been paying any attention at all? And maybe they hadn't.
Zen story about a king whose people had grown soft and entitled. And he was really dissatisfied with the state of affairs, so he wanted to teach them a lesson. And his plan was simple. He would place a large boulder in the middle of a main road, completely blocking entrance to the city. And then he hid and would see how people dealt with it. How would they respond? Would they band together and remove it, or would they just give up? Well, with growing disappointment, the king watched person after person come, face this obstacle, and just turn away. Discouraged. A couple pushed a little half-heartedly, but then turned around. After several days, a lone peasant came on the way, trying to get into town, and he didn't turn around. He tried to push it, and that didn't work, but you could kind of see the light bulb go on in his head. He had an idea, so he went into the woods and got a huge branch, and he turned it into a lever. And with that lever, he dislodged the massive rock off the road. And beneath the rock were a purse of gold coins and a note from the king, which said, "The obstacle in the path becomes the path." Today I'm starting a series called The Obstacle is the Way, or The Obstacle is the Path, a book by Ryan Holiday. Somebody loaned me this book, or gave it to me, about a year and a half ago, and it's been on my nightstand to read, and I finally picked it up. I thought, what a great time to think about the obstacle is the way. Basically, Holiday says, whatever we face, we have a choice. We can be defeated by obstacles or that stand in front of us. We can survive them, or we can thrive through them. I really needn't even name the obstacles that we are facing right now as a society, from COVID-19 to sheltering in place, to the economy, to facing racism, the isolation. Well, those are all the external obstacles, but then we have the internal obstacles: fear, uncertainty, disorientation, frustration, discouragement. Really, we've been thrown into a world few of us had ever imagined. Ryan Holiday in his book gives a lot of examples of people who overcame the obstacles that were put in their path and went on to be some of the most successful people that we have known. He grounds his theory in three things: perception, action, and will. And today I want to talk about perception. I want to talk about it in a bit of a different way than he talked about it, but perception, perspective, and power. Perception and perspective are different. So first, let's talk about perception. Perception is how we see and understand what occurs around us. I want you to look at this picture on the screen. I know that some of you have seen it before, but even if you've seen it before, your initial perception might be different than if you look at it longer. So what do you see in the picture? Do you see an old woman with a big nose? Or do you see a beautiful young woman? I'll let you look at it for a minute. Talk about it with the person next to you if you're watching with someone. What do you see? Can you see the old woman? Now, can you switch your perspective and see the young woman? And once you've seen one, can you go back and forth? All right, I'm going to put another picture up on the screen. How many people do you see in this picture? How many are there? Now, when I looked at this, I could only see two, but I knew that wasn't the right answer. I knew there were more people, but I couldn't for the life of me figure it out. Well, there's a baby in the picture. Can you see it? Well, here it is. Once you perceive it, you can't unsee it. We can heighten our perception. We can see and understand more than at a first glance. There is often more to the story. And perception is how we see and understand what is around us. But perspective is that particular attitude toward or way of regarding what we see, a point of view. Now listen to this. Perspective is what we decide those events will mean. Perspective, one person sees a crisis, another an opportunity. And we have a choice about our perspective. Nelson Mandela, through perspective, turned a prison into a workshop where he trained himself for 27 years and then became the first president of an apartheid-free South Africa. Perspective. Did you love the story that Kelly told from the Gospel of Mark? The disciples had just come from Jesus feeding the 4,000, seeing what could happen. The miracles, however that happened, we don't know, but they were there and they witnessed it. They got into the boat and Jesus began to talk about what the religious authorities had just been saying, about asking for a sign. And Jesus says, beware of the yeast of these religious authorities, of these Pharisees. And the disciples say, is it because we forgot to bring the bread in the boat? Is that why he's talking about that? They'd only brought one piece of bread in the boat. Their perspective is all wrong. They hadn't even, Jesus says, do you not perceive? Do you not understand what just happened? And here 20 minutes later, you've forgotten? Your perspective is we don't have enough and that I'm mad at you? I feel bad for the disciples in the book of Mark. He's always painting them as really dim-witted and never getting anything. But I can also relate to them. Jesus was asking them to change their perspective. Perspective, if you hear nothing else, hear this. Perspective is we decide what story we are going to tell ourselves. That's perspective. What story are we telling ourselves about the obstacles in our way right now, or what we perceive as obstacles? If someone were to arrive that just got here from a desert island and had no idea of what was going on, what story would we tell them about this time? And what stories will we look back on and tell about this time? Perspective, of course, depends on where we stand in life, but we have power over our perspective. Two great philosophers, Marcus Aurelius and my mother, Joyce Nixon. My mother said 99% of life is attitude. She always used to say that to me. And as I was a kid and then a youth and a young adult, it annoyed me every time. But I knew, it annoyed me because I knew the truth of it. Attitude is 99% of life. Perspective. Marcus Aurelius said, everything we see is perspective, not the truth. We have the power to change our perspective about what obstacles we face. We have the power to re-examine our truths. You know, in California, we're really big here on, owning our truths. And sometimes we need to re-examine. Sometimes we need to switch perspectives. Chase was telling me earlier of a story that she always uses, that there's two people sitting across the table from each other, and in front of one is a big number 6. And when asked, what is that number, the one on this side says, it's a number 6. The person on the other side of the table says, no, it's a number 9. And neither can convince the other that they are right or wrong. How to change perspective? One person would have to get up and walk around to the other side of the table and look at it differently. I think about the times that we are in, not only how we're looking at COVID-19, but just say, for instance, what is our perspective on the protest sweeping the nation? Depends on where we stand. It depends on who we're willing to look through the eyes of. We can re-examine our truths, re-examine our perspectives. At the turn of the century, the 19th century, Arthur James Balfour said it this way: "Our greatest truths are but half-truths. Think not to settle down forever in any truth, but use it as a tent in which to pass a summer night. But build no house on it, or it will become your tomb. When you first become aware of its insufficiency and see some counter-truth looming up in the distance, then weep not, but rejoice. It is the Lord's voice saying, 'Take up your bed and walk.'" Friends, I think we are in a time where we are being invited to look with new eyes at many different things in the world and in our societies, and if we really dig down in our own lives, about what counts, what matters, who matters, and how we can live more harmoniously together. Perception, perspective, and power. You know the prayer so well. God, grant me to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. That's how people who go to AA focus their efforts. It's a lot easier to fight an addiction when you aren't also fighting the fact that you were born, that your parents were terrible, or that you lost everything. That's done. Focus on the power that you have, the program teaches, over the things that you have power over. What's up to us? What do we have power over? Our emotions, our judgments, our attitude, our perspectives, our decisions, our determination. That's where the power is. And so, I leave you with a question, an invitation for you to reflect this week on perspective at any given turn when obstacles come your way. I love David White's perspective. You are not a troubled guest on this earth. You are not an accident amidst other accidents. You were invited from another greater night than one from when you have just emerged. What if we share a perspective like his? That our life is an open and lovely white page on the writing desk. And what we can plan is too small for our lives, so let's shift our perspective for wholeheartedness and compassion and leverage those obstacles so that we can thrive together. Amen.
From whence cometh my help?
you so much, Melanie, for that beautiful song, one of my all-time favorites that I return to again and again. This week, our plate offering will go to CCSM's Sanctuary Fund. For those of you that are visiting in online today, CCSM became a sanctuary church in 2017. And we had a sanctuary guest, Stephanie, for about a year here, and just about 6 or 7 months ago, we received David and Byron, a father and son from Guatemala, who are now living with us as well. And so the gift that you give today will be able to support them, whether it's childcare for Byron and summer camps that are open, or summer daycare at least, groceries, basic necessities. That all comes out of our sanctuary fund as we support this family that had been separated at the border. So they've got an incredible story, and they're really thriving in this time the best that they can. Can you imagine all the trauma of coming across the border and then finally being reunited after 18 months, finally getting settled in, and then facing COVID-19 situation? So the gifts that you give will really support them as they continue to live with us and continue on their path to be self-sustaining. Thank you in advance for all your generosities. You'll also see that in an email that I sent yesterday, and if you're not on our weekly emails, please let us know in the chat, and we'd be happy to add you, that we are going to try to start going live on Sunday mornings in a few weeks. And so we need some help with that, to some folks to underwrite equipment. If you have any interest in that, send me an email and I'll send you the details. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope that you've received some practical spirituality, that this week when stuff comes your way, you can think about shifting your perspective, opening your eyes, and asking for the Spirit to guide you. Let's sing together, In the Midst of New Dimensions. Beloved, as you go forth, may you know that you are not alone. May the God of rainbows, the God of hope, be your present reality in your life. Hear the words of Jesus. My peace I give to you, my peace I leave with you. a peace that the world cannot give, and a peace that the world cannot take away. And may the blessing of the Holy One, the God who sees all, remain with you now and always. Amen.